To get a better idea of what's coming next in virtual reality, we've got a great panel of folks who are deep in the VR trenches, and they're working on really different cool aspects of the technology. So let's bring them out and get some of their thoughts on what the future holds.
So I'm Justin Moravitz. I'm in Bend, Oregon. I run Zero Transform, and I make virtual reality games. In the past, I worked on a title called Proton Pulse, and a demo called Vanguard V about a year ago, and I've been working with Google, Oculus, Valve, Samsung, basically anybody who has a pair of distorted lenses. I've got to talk to them, and it's been an exciting year. I can't wait to see what's coming.
My name is Gabe Paez. I founded Wild. We're working on a solution for taking virtual reality and mapping it to a multisensory physical space. So we're exploring the possibility of utilizing this technology for brand experiences and for telling our own stories.
Hi, I'm Thomas Hayden. I'm a co-founder at 360 Labs. We're a Portland-based virtual reality production company specializing in 360-degree video, live action.
VR development and excitement has really ramped up a lot in the past couple years in particular. Do you guys attribute a lot of this to the arrival or the impending arrival of Oculus, or do you feel like there are other things happening as well that have made everything seem to move a lot faster?
It's been my understanding that the patent for distorted lenses ended around the same time the Oculus Rift came out. And so what I saw when I was working at Sony is there was certainly a large interest in virtual reality for quite some time, but Oculus really brought it center stage. And so they had something that was affordable, accessible, and it worked. It just worked. I mean, I've been playing with VR headsets for years, and I try to convince my friends, and they're like, they tried this on instant flip. And so that excitement, that momentum, I think that they had a huge part of that.
Okay.
I think on a broader scale, I just think that people are ready for kind of a new tech revolution in technology, and taking the internet, moving on to mobile, and now really virtual reality presents an entirely different way of interfacing with technology, where it's truly centered around us and our really natural human perception of the world, which is first person.
Okay, let's talk about applications. Some applications are really easy to imagine, like playing a game in virtual reality. How else do you think that we'll be using virtual reality in the years to come?
So many ways. We can see a future, and we're already seeing demos that are showing the ability to communicate in virtual reality, feel like you're in another place entirely, and have the other person that you're speaking with feel like they're in your place. It's now possible to live stream 360 video from one place to another, and that's an amazing step forward. With the demonstrations, when you have gesture control and everything else that's coming down the pike, I've heard of demos that I haven't seen that just sound spectacular, where I'm throwing catch with another person, a real live human being in a virtual world. There will be some amazing applications in training, education. I think it's going to revolutionize everything, and I think in 2 years it won't be strange at all to get on a flight and have almost everybody on board the plane have a VR headset on.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the education and kind of learning aspect of virtual reality, I think, is fascinating, because it's an entirely different way to ingest information, which I think is really natural to us, where we are accustomed to experiencing the world, and again, from our point of view. And we learn really well, not by necessarily reading a textbook about the Amazon, but about like going to the Amazon and really experiencing it and learning about specific plants and animals. So that applies clearly like directly to education, but also just, it's a new level of creating empathy with the audience, which directly applies to entertainment and gaming. You're able to experience that game or that story you're watching in an entirely new way, which is visceral and experiential. You're experiencing it rather than watching it.
So it's been said that virtual reality can be somewhat socially isolating, but there are many people out there who are socially isolated. And I'm working with an individual down in Silicon Valley who is bringing VR to the elderly who are socially isolated. They don't have really access to talk to other people. And so through networked VR, you're able to communicate and to discuss and all of these things and relax and network again. There's so many amazing applications that over the coming years is just going to be mind-boggling.
What is one aspect of virtual reality that you're most excited to see develop more over the next year or so?
Personally, I'm really excited about seeing Locomotion develop, where we can physically move around in a space. I think, we're so accustomed to experiencing content in a chair in our society that just the idea of standing up and moving around is just mind-boggling to me. It's just a whole new way to get literally step into content. And so I think that's going to be hugely eye-opening for people and a big differentiator in the market. Just as average consumers come to virtual reality, what can I do in virtual reality? I put on this headset, I look around, but I can potentially move in virtual reality and walk. That's a whole new experience that's really exciting.
Absolutely, the Locomotion is going to be spectacular. What I'm most excited about is the capabilities for storytelling. When your device, when the screen that you're watching is smart enough to know which way you're looking and know what you're looking at, there are tremendous ways that we can make the content change so that it's new every time you look at it and so that it's always surprising. And I think that some of those storytelling techniques are just beginning to be explored now.
Actually, that was something I wanted to talk to you about specifically because your company works on live action
Right.
content, correct?
That's correct.
So talk to us a little bit about how that's different, doing that is different from doing something that's animated in virtual reality, and what some of the challenges are that are unique to doing live action content.
For the creator or for the user?
Well, but maybe a little bit of both, if you would mind.
Well, from the creation side, it's much easier to press record on 6 GoPros than it is to create a virtual world. So, we're capturing 360 video now of the whole room. Hi. I'll be editing this later. And it's a fairly simple process to capture. Of course, then we go home, we stitch it all together, we edit it, and then try to tell a story with it, which is the same process everybody's been doing in editing for a long time. It's just now it's a little bit wider field of view. So I can't speak much to, I'm not a coder, so I can't speak much to how much more difficult it is to create animation, but I mean, it's an amazing world out there, and in 3D, that's another level that animation can bring out. And one of the key differences in sort of this VR family tree that seems to have branched very early into animated experiences versus live action, I think the really exciting part will be the canopy where those branches come back together and the combination of the two. The most recent project with Nike that YouTube used to launch their 360 advertising platform is just exceptional. It's a great comparison of what animation and what gaming can be when you combine it with live action. And then from the user perspective, obviously you can move around in a virtual world that's entirely created. The 360 videos we create are more of a fly-on-the-wall experience. Sure, we can move you through the experience, we can mount you on an athlete, but it's always sort of an out-of-body experience. It's never quite as going to be as immersive tactilely as an animated game, which we love to play.
We were talking just a moment ago about Locomotion. Let's talk a little bit about controls. How are we going to use our hands or our voices and our bodies to control virtual reality? One thing that Oculus recently showed off that some of you guys might have seen are these sort of half-moon controllers that they're going to come out with their forthcoming headset. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you think we'll be interacting with those and how we'll interact in general with virtual reality?
So when a new platform comes out, you generally see a lot of things from an older platform, so like a gamepad in this case. And there are many VR applications that still is best for. This is why they include gamepads with VR today. But when you get the Half Moon controller, this is something I've been developing with Oculus on. And it's an interesting thing because it's optically tracked and it knows the spatial distance between what you see and where your hands are. And so you can go up to an object in VR and pick it up. That's the most basic thing. When somebody puts on a VR headset, almost the first thing you always see is them try to see their own hand. And it's the most basic thing, but it's very powerful. And you've got one for each hand, so you're able to toss something back and forth and flip it up and catch it again. And it's so accurate and so precise on its position. It's where your hand is in reality. And so when you stop thinking about your hand and you're just interacting like you would in the real world, that's insane. And so you're seeing this with the Vive as well. They have very good tracking, but the Half Moon controller fits around your hand and you can just grab and pick things up. It's an incredible device. And so virtual reality is bringing what we do in the real world with moving our hands, walking around a space, and making it as intuitive in VR as it is in the real world. And so the closer we get to that on all aspects, the more we can expand on what worlds we go to. We can fly through the rings of Saturn and a variety of other things and just have coffee with somebody else. It's kind of difficult to drink with the headset on, but maybe someday. But no, it's an incredible input device. I highly recommend anybody try that out.
And just to add, like, part of also what we're working on with taking virtual reality, mapping it to a physical space, is experimenting with natural inputs. So, you know, as simple as like a light switch, that we can map that, just like Justin was talking about, in a physical space to a virtual space. And you can use an interface, which is a light switch. We all know how to work it. It's very natural. It's not a controller. It doesn't have an abstract that we have to understand in order to interface with it. Similarly, like something on a table that we pick up and touch, that is, it's like a completely natural input. It's just as you would in the real life, but mapped into virtual reality. And that's kind of a part of virtual reality that really interests me also, is a connection to like a very literal, visceral, physical world that's totally natural to us.
One of the big challenges that we've still got with virtual reality is getting the focus cues just right. As you guys know, that's really challenging with stereoscopic 3D, which is what a lot of these companies are using to create 3D virtual reality imagery. How do you think we're going to solve this? I mean, if the focus cues aren't correct when you're using virtual reality, some people like me get nauseous, and it's just not a very fun experience. How do you think we'll fix that?
As far as the focus cues that come with animation, and I can't speak much to that, but we've certainly been known at 360 Labs to make some people nauseous when we put a camera on a kiteboard or...
You're not alone.
And exactly, we're not alone. But we're also not afraid to move a camera. But anytime that your position or in virtual reality is going to be moving and your body isn't actually moving in space, there's going to be a disconnect between what your eyes are seeing and what your brain is telling you and what your body is also telling your brain. So that disconnect is going to cause some level of nausea. I've seen some fantastic research papers. There was a professor, I can't name exactly where, but he exposed his students to a number of virtual reality experiences and measured their rate of nausea, and it was typically coming in at about 20% of the average population. And then he had a theory. His hypothesis was, well, there's no nose in virtual reality, and yet there's one on all of our faces, and we're very much accustomed to seeing it all day, every day. In fact, it's an anchor for our brain. And that was really intriguing to me because he found that he could reduce nausea by simply adding the shading of a nose. And I mean, how interesting is that without the nose, you would feel lost in any world. But you never think of it because you never go without your nose until you put on a headset. And and I just love those little simple cues that we could reduce that level in that 20% of the population. Mm-hmm. And of course, stabilization techniques that are coming through from companies like Kohler, who was bought this summer by GoPro. They do the stitching software that we use to stitch together 360-degree videos and have been working with them for years. And some of their their stabilization algorithms isn't the typical video stabilization that we typically use by cutting off some of the frame. We can't do that in 360. So they're actually just trying to stabilize the horizon, but sometimes that's not going to be so easy. And say, if you check out our demo outside is rafting the Grand Canyon, we can put you into 15-foot waves, and the fact is that makes you nauseous in reality as well. So
I might skip that demo.
It's through clever design, I believe. On the interactive game side, there are, for every demo that's out there, there's like 10 roller coaster experiences, and that's usually what you find somebody wanting to try first. It gets old pretty quick though. So one of the things that in VR that was thought to be a no-brainer was first-person shooters. That's not working out so well because of the traversal and strafing and things. It's making people ill. So what you want to do is put the person who is in VR in the driver's seat. And so it's like the difference between getting nauseous riding a car or driving a car. And so in one of the titles I worked on, Vanguard V, it's a constant straightforward motion. And there's all these cues before you start that something's about to happen. Then there's a blink, and then you're constantly moving forward. I never turn the camera. I never rotate the camera. That's all up to the player. They're driving. And so as long as they're driving, there's always a good frame of reference, kind of like having a nose. Then nausea pretty much goes away. But you have to have clever design. You got to think about how the player is going to interact. You can't have these constant cutting, shaking, strafing. But some people don't have a problem with that. I get sick. So it's
So you understand.
Oh yeah. So that's why I take that out first. But through that, you get user reviews on that. So there's a comfort rating on the Oculus software. And I think over time, things are just going to get more and more curated and better rated based on comfort.
Cool. We're going to go to a few audience questions right now. So if anybody has a question.
You were earlier talking about interfaces that are effectively skeuomorphisms in virtual reality, and I was kind of wondering, we had that as a large interface design debate just recently, and kind of wondering if that's a worthwhile pathway to go in virtual reality, or if it'd be better to skip it altogether and go for the innovative interface.
That's a good question. I think I just believe I believe they're unrelated because again, this isn't a flat screen necessarily in front of us. This is, especially if we're talking about a tactile interface, we're talking about a literal tactile interface, something that feels and is the same texture and the same temperature as what I'm seeing. That one-to-one match is, to me, makes it worth it. That sells it in because it's interesting, this kind of points out one of the questions about that where is that line, and probably that line will blur over time about what is augmented reality and what is virtual reality. I just really like the idea, and I think it's intuitive, again, even for the motion sickness question of having of that connection to the physical world. I think there's an interesting thing that happens in virtual reality when there's a physical thing there and you reach out and expect to have some touch point to it, and you instead fall through it. It's just a weird feeling because you get so present in the experience that you start to believe it, and then going through an object is just not natural. And so I really like that one-to-one connection with the physical world, even given its limitations. I think it's still a premium experience that is so much more visceral and relatable for the average person.
Can we do one more question?
I'm still trying to wrap my head fully around VR and where it's headed. Video games, education, what other uses have you guys found for it? And obviously we're right at the beginning of VR. What kind of limitations do you guys see in the future and kind of stopping points that you guys have found?
Other uses, well, therapy. For instance, somebody who is afraid of claustrophobia where else can you simulate that than in VR? You can literally put somebody, and this would be very mean to somebody with claustrophobia, but you can put somebody in a box and it feels like it's right there. And what's interesting is when you do that, the person who's in VR, their heart rate changes, they breathe differently. They're actually, to some degree, getting that same experience. But over time, some therapies kind of acclimate you to things. So like air travel or arachnophobia, a variety of things that don't actually exist, but in VR, we get that same sensation. People who are truly not happy with a spider or flying or anything along those lines. And it can be a very powerful tool, I mean, in education as well, but yeah, I think therapy is one of the big things.
Virtual reality is the fastest airplane we've ever invented. You know, it's like it can take us anywhere instantly. And that, I think that makes it kind of clear to me, even the possibilities of that. I mean, there are such clear business possibilities, use cases for virtual reality that go beyond like telepresence. It's just literally, you know, having a conversation in the same space with somebody completely remotely isolated, in two distinct remote locations. That is amazingly powerful, not just from business. I mean, it makes a clear sense there, but also for, you know, average people who just live apart. I'm also interested beyond gaming in the world that will emerge of just cinematic VR, of experiences that are, and this is kind of largely what we're kind of the trajectory we're on, experiences that aren't necessarily you wouldn't consider a game, but they are you do interact with them, but they're more like watching a film. And so that's kind of an interesting branch off of like gaming versus entertainment that will be interesting to explore.
You know, I was going to say therapy when you first brought that up, so I'm glad Justin did. I've seen VR being used to treat PTSD and returning soldiers from Iraq, and it's powerful. You know, guys who got hit by an IED on the top of a Humvee, and you know, then were pulled out, and they end up in Walter Reed or in Germany, and how powerful it was for them just to be able to feel like they were back on that same street in Baghdad, and just be able to make it to the end of the street and turn the corner was a great starting point for the doctors to start the therapy from there, and that was powerful. Sort of moving on from there, other applications, it really is up to your imagination in how are you going to use this new tool. It really is a new medium, and will, I think, evolve beyond sort of a medium into many other things. We really can't predict it at this point.
Thank you guys so much. It was really great to have you speaking with me today. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.